real, original, authentic Pan-Africanism or the fake fraud Pan-Africanism that masquerades?
Do we have the fake and then the original? Which
Well,
one is this? Welcome back to my YouTube channel. I go by the name Me, Myself, and I. Epic it was. Remember to like and share to this amazing video. Today, I'm here with this amazing gentleman. Before you introduce yourself, I would like to say a very big thank you for always subscribing, liking, and sharing to this amazing YouTube channel. I'm here with
Obinfo Obadele Kambo, founder of Abibitumi, which is where we're located right now.
Obadele. That name sounds like a Nigerian name.
It's Yoruba.
Yoruba. Have you ever been to Nigeria?
Yeah, I've been there several times.
But wait, where are you from?
So I was born in the United States.
You're born in the United States. So you coming to Nigeria, what was the mindset of people telling you about Nigeria before we come to Ghana?
So by that time, I had already been to Ghana several times. I was already fluent in Chi.
Oh, okay.
I had taken Chi at the university level.
Wow.
So, with this, so Yoruba became the second language that I, became fluent in.
You can speak?
Yeah, I can speak Yoruba.
So how do we say, how are you?
Bawoni.
Boroni?
Bawoni.
Bawoni. Wow.
So after a year, I was taking advanced Yoruba in Nigeria with native speakers, reading folk tales, plays, just every genre of Yoruba, so that was how I ended up getting into the Yoruba language. Wadjane in Krane akoto jim. Wadjane in Krane akoto jim.
Akoto jim. And it's West.
Yeah. So I'll translate that for those who may not understand. It's like you've run away from the fire ants and hopped into the fire. So it's like I'm trying to get away from English. So why am I trying to go to a language that has Arab influence? Because the Arabs were our first enslavers, and they're still enslaving black people to this day in the land of black people. So it didn't make much sense. So they had Sudanese Arabic, they had Hausa, they had Kiswahili, and they had Yoruba. So I chose Yoruba as the best out of the options that they.
So how many African countries have you been so far?
Okay, let's count. I should write it down so I just know off the top of my head. So Ghana, of course.
Ghana.
Burkina Faso. Mali, Togo, Benin, Nigeria, Cote d'Ivoire, Senegal, Gambia, I'm already mentioned. Kenya,
10,
Ethiopia,
11,
Egypt,
12,
South Africa,
13.
I think I don't want to mention
13.
I think it's 13.
13. Like so far, 13. Yeah. Wow. How do you feel like you moving to different African country to see the culture? What made you even to move to different African country in the first place? So
my mother brought me here to Ghana in 1998 on the Sankofa journey. For those who are interested, SANKOFAJOURNEY.com. Don't go for the fake ones. People are coming up with Sankofa journeys left, right. All of those are fake. If you don't see my face or my mother's face, it's a fake one. Ours is the one that's been around for 26 years. No one had the name when we were doing the Sankofa journey. That was when I first came back in 1998. So this year we have the Abibitumi conference on Black Power, and it's part of the Sankofa journey. So again, my mother brought me here in 98. 99, I came again for another 2 weeks. In 2000 and 2001, I did my junior year. That was a study abroad year, where I was learning Chi at the university level with native speakers. At that time, I wrote the longest paper I'd written in any language, which was in Chi, and it was 41 pages on Akan proverbs in different social contexts. And then from there, when I went to grad school, that's why I started learning Yoruba. Then I started learning Wolof. Then I started learning Kikongo. I had been learning Kiswahili in undergrad. And those are the main languages that I have, conversational all the way up to native speaker fluency. And I just did an interview, and I said, well, everything I just said in that interview, I can say everything in Tree without any English word whatsoever. I could do the same thing in Yoruba. Those are the best two languages. Wolof is a little bit below that, and it's because I've been here for so long without Wolof speakers. But the Wolof is coming back again because I teach my children Wolof on Wednesday. So Wednesday Wolof day.
Wow.
So Monday is Chi, Tuesday is Yoruba, Wednesday is Wolof, Thursday is Medu Necha, that's what they call hieroglyphs, and then Friday is Kiswahili and Kikongo. So basically my main languages, and again, so native speaker fluency is Chi, native speaker fluency is Yoruba, Wolof is, I would say, slightly below that, and then Medu Necha, I read it and write it. Any text you give me, I can read it and I can write, the Medu Necha.
Wow.
At worst, I would just take a grammar or dictionary with me, but for the most part, that one, if it was like a fluent speaking language, some people give attempts to speak it, but they do it on the basis of Egyptological conventions or Coptic for some. And then, Kiswahili, conversational, Kikongo also, conversational.
Why was it so important for you to be moving to different African countries to learn their culture, to learn their languages? Like even in Ghana, you're learning the Twi, in Nigeria, you're learning the Yoruba, in Swahili, and you're learning so much. Like, why? What is the main reason why you are doing all this?
So I've given a couple of things. So one is my teacher of Medu Neter told me I need to do that professionally.
Okay.
So that was one. The other side is that my mother's Okomfo, which is a healer and a diviner.
Okay.
She's a psychologist with a PhD by training, but she realized that, white PhDs in psychology are not enough, in that to really understand healing at a deeper level, we have to look at our own indigenous healing and spiritual systems. So she became initiated as an Okomfo, which is much more holistic in terms of its approach, as opposed to segmenting, dichotomization, diametric opposites that you find in the so-called Western psychology profession. So it does a disservice if that's all we have. We need, deeper tools that we can operate with.
How is Okomfo means to you as African American coming to?
No, I'm not any type of American. I'm an anti-American.
You're an anti-American.
And I've always been an anti-American. And this is the thing, so people would think that, okay, someone who's in America should be American. They would think so. But from birth, we're always, from birth, we understood that we're not Americans. So when other people would sing the national anthem, we would all stay seated. Why? Because that's what Americans do, and we're not Americans. They would sing the national anthem, we wouldn't say anything. They do the Pledge of Allegiance to the flag. We would never stand up for that. If we saw a flag, we would spit on the flag.
Wow.
Everyone is, celebrating these white horror days. They're celebrating the 4th of July. They're celebrating Christian Sanity Christmas. They're celebrating Halloween. We never celebrate any of those things. Why? Because that's what Americans do. We're not Americans, so we don't do that. So it tends to be that those who come into any level of African consciousness are very clear in terms of identity. Whereas here, people will be like, oh, I'm in Ghana. Oh, I want to go to America so I can be American. Now I have a passport, now I'm American. And it means that they really don't understand very much, very deeply. And they don't think very deeply about what these things are. So the people who've raped, enslaved, murdered, sodomized, lobotomized, lynched, castrated, like, why would you call yourself the same name as your enemy? It would be like, this is like what they call Stockholm Syndrome. All right, they kidnapped me, that doesn't mean that I'm a kidnapper now.
Okay.
You understand? So that's essentially it. So I'm an anti-American. So
you are anti-American, you're not African-American, you are anti-American.
Exactly.
How did you get to know about African, even in the first place?
Yeah, that's through my parents. So, we have multiple generations. Even my great-grandfather was part of Nana Marcus Garvey's UNIA, the Universal Negro Improvement Association, which, the clarion call was about returning to the continent. So most of the speeches that people would know about, my great-grandfather was the one who transcribed them in the Negro World newspaper. So if you know the words of Nana Marcus Garvey, usually it's coming through my grandfather, who knew shorthand and was able to, implement that skill. So, this is the thing, like here on the continent, when we come from the diaspora, often we don't know how deeply ingrained Christian sanity is, for example. So you have people who have, like, well, if we come here, we'll think, oh, you must have just decided to become Christian like when you turn 18. But oftentimes, no, their parents were in Christian sanity, their grandparents, usually it's like, oh, in 1920, that's when my great-great-grandfather decided to be Christian, and we've been Christian ever since. Or vice versa in Islam, we've been in Islam since the 1850s. So like people in the diaspora don't have a concept that continental Africans are that deep, multiple generations in Christian sanity, Islam, or any of those types of things. And by the same token, those on the continent have no idea that we're multiple generations in terms of being anti-American, in terms of understanding who we are. So if you go to like the early 1800s, you had what was called the African Lodge, not the African American Lodge. You have the African Methodist Episcopal Church. Even if we're building a church, we're calling it African. We're not saying it's African American or any type of American, this thing. And, you find that the African Blood Brotherhood, you have all of these things that tell us that we're clear on who we are. Now, why are we clear on who we are? Because we're surrounded by our enemies, and we know that what we have in common is our common ancestry, common descent that leads to common interests. You understand? The people who got shipped there weren't saying, oh, we're all the same thing per se. Whoa. If you were taken there, you'll say, oh, I'm Igbo. And even you'll get down to the minutia of, oh, I'm not just Yoruba, I'm from Ekiti, or I'm from Ondo, or I'm from Oyo, or I'm not just a Khan, I'm Fanti, and we don't like the Asantese. So they get down to like the teeny tiny thing. But you'll realize that when you're getting lynched and when he's getting lynched, they don't care about any of those things. No. So you come together on the basis of what you have in common is that you're all black people. You have common ancestry, you have common descent, and that leads to common interests. So again, going back into the very first black people who are kidnapped and enslaved and taken there to the United States, that's 1526. Now, a lot of people talk about 1619, but 1526 was, this rebellion of San Miguel de Guadalupe. That's when the Spanish tried to establish a foothold on what would become the continental U.S., and the black people whooped that right behind and drove them out to the point that they were not able to establish a foothold. But once they drove the Spanish away, they stayed there as permanent settlers. Those are the first permanent settlers to cross the Atlantic and be permanent settlers in what would become the U.S. And again, that's before 1619. We're talking about 1526. So those people were very clear, no matter where they got shipped from, that look, we're all black people, let's drive these non-black people out. Same thing in Jamaica, same thing in Haiti, same thing. That's all of those places where you have a degree of black consciousness, right? Yeah. And you'll find it where they're saying cleave to the black or black power movement, or
I was about to ask you, what is your thought on Pan-Africanism? Is this something that we should continue, or you feel like it's draining, or do you, if it is draining, how do we, back it up to make it the way our great grand leaders, yes.
The real, original, authentic Pan-Africanism or the fake fraud Pan-Africanism that masquerades?
Do we have the fake and then the original? Which one is this?
We don't have the fake. The fake has been co-opted by those who are perpetrating a fraud intentionally against black people. The reason being is that if you go to the 1900 resolution that was from the original Pan-African Conference, they use the term African, black, and Negro interchangeably. So when they say African, they only are talking about black people, you understand? So when they're talking about Pan-Africanism, they're talking about black people regardless of location, you understand? So even the person who invented the word Pan-African was coming from Trinidad. So he's not just talking about continental Africans, he's actually talking about black people regardless of location. That's what original Pan-Africanism was about. And in that same declaration, the resolution, they mention Haiti, they mention Liberia, they mention Abyssinia, that's referring to Ethiopia, and any other Negro nations that arise. They mention that Congo should become a great central Negro state, you understand? So they're very clear that they're only talking about black people they talk about, and its riches, its wealth should be counted in the prosperity of its black population. But nowadays, when you have people who say African, they mean anyone who's on the continent, whether they're black or not. So the people who invented Pan-Africanism were not talking about anyone who happens to be here, whether they be colonizers, whether they be enslavers. But those who hijacked Pan-Africanism are talking about anyone on the continent to the exclusion of the people who are actually mentioned by name. So the example would be in 2016. Haiti, what they call Haiti, applied to join the African Union. And they were told that you're not African. Right? They said the founding constitutional act of the African Union is that it has to be African states. And even though it's more black people in Haiti than many countries that are in the African Union,
true.
Including Algeria, where they're still enslaving black people, including Libya, where they're still enslaving black people, including Tunisia, where they're still enslaving black people, Sudan, where they're still enslaving black people, Egypt, where they're still enslaving black people, Morocco, where they're still enslaving black people. Matter of fact, Morocco applies to join in the same year, 2016, and they were accepted even though the word for black person and slave is the same word. Morocco was allowed to join. So it's because of this fake fraud hijack Pan-Africanism that you can have something that's called an African Union and you can say African and not mean black people. You can say African and you can mean the Arabs who just got here. You understand? In the year 639, we know when they came, and that's where they came across the Sinai Peninsula into what is now known as Egypt by the sword, and they killed, raped, murdered, pillaged, plundered, and all the things that they've been doing ever since. But they're in the African Union. But guess what? They're also in the Arab League. This means whatever you talk about as black people, they can go back to their cousins in Syria, in Lebanon, in Saudi Arabia, and so forth. They can say, oh, this is what the black people are planning. What are we going to do to steal their oil? You understand?
The gold.
Steal their gold, steal their minerals. So this is, usually they tend to be interested in oil because, you know, that's what the greasy Arabs are interested in. But, you know, that's what's going on right now. So you have the original Pan-Africanism, which is about black people exclusively. But then you have the fake Pan-Africanism, and they actually tried to change the name and call it All Africanism.
Oh, wow.
That was Nana Kwame Nkrumah actually who tried to change the name.
Kwame Nkrumah tried to change the name.
That's why he had the All African People's Revolutionary Party.
Wow.
That's where he had, you know, all African
Is it something that we should look into it if it is good or it's not good?
I wrote an article on it, so if you want more, you can actually go to the primary sources.
Okay.
On there.
It's on your site.
Yeah, it's on my site. Yeah.
Okay. But just brief us a bit.
So if you search my name, Obadele Kamban, in Haiti, Morocco, and the African Union, so any of those keyword searches, my name, Obadele Kamban, and type Haiti, the article will come up. And the presentation will come up and so forth. So they also had the All African Peoples Conference, and that was for the same thing because they realized that Pan-African meant black people, but they're trying to mean just people who are on the continent, whether or not they're black. And then those who were invited, they invited Tunisia, Egypt at that time, which was, you know, Arab. Then they invited, of course, Ghana was here because it was held in Ghana. So you have just a hodgepodge. They actually invited the Dutch Boers, the apartheid Dutch Boers. Why? Because they're on the continent. And they're trying to show that we're not interested in black people. We're interested in whoever's on the continent. We're non-racialist. So, you know, the only people who are trying to be non-racialist, because the Arabs are still in the Arab League, they know who they are. The Dutch Boers, they have an all-white town in Umzansi, what they call South Africa. They're clear on who they are. The only people who are confused are the black people who've been trained by white people.